Hey, Mike, are you there? Mike? Oh, there. Are you there?
Yeah, hey Shik, how's it going?
Okay, I was just having a little bit of trouble starting up here. Okay, so how's it going?
Not bad. Yeah, not bad.
All right. I finished that whole book at I'll Build You a Temple book.
Okay.
11 days it took me.
Oh wow,
Uh,
okay.
Now I'm starting to read. Have you ever heard of Govinda Swami?
Hmm.
Yeah, he wrote a book called Guru Tattva.
Okay.
It's all about accepting a guru. It's really good. He was a great soul. I don't know when he died. I couldn't find him in Wikipedia. He must have died some few decades ago, but he was probably a disciple. I don't know when he passed away. So let's see if I can share the screen here. There we go.
Yeah.
We're in 12.
Yep.
Haribo. Let's see. Let's see. I can do a double thing here. Okay. Devotional service. You want to start off?
I'm sure. Yeah. Chapter 12, Devotional Service, Text 1. Arjuna Uvacha, Evam Satata Yuktaye Bhaktastvam Parlupasate Chapi Aksharam Avyaktam Tisham Ke Yoga Vitama. Synonyms. Arjuna Uvacha, Arjuna said, Evam, thus, Satata, always, Yukta, engaged, yea, those who, Bhakta, devotees, Tvam, new, Paryupasate, properly worship, yea, those who, Cha, also, Api, again, Aksharam, beyond the senses, Avyaktam, the unmanifested, Tesham, of them, Ke, who, Yoga Vitama, the most perfect in knowledge of yoga. Translation. Arjuna inquired, which are considered to be more perfect, those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? Purport.
Well, let's see how long this is. Why don't you take two paragraphs and then let's take turn doing one paragraph each.
Okay.
You can read the first one.
Krishna has now explained about the personal, the impersonal, and the universal, and has described all kinds of devotees and yogis. Generally, the transcendentalist can be divided into two classes. One is the impersonalist, and the other is the personalist. The personalist devotee engages himself with all energy in the service of the Supreme Lord. The impersonalist also engages himself not directly in the service of Krishna, but in meditation on the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested.
We find in this chapter that of the different processes for realization of the absolute truth, bhakti yoga, devotional service, is the highest. If one at all desires to have the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he must take to devotional service.
Those who worship the Supreme Lord directly by devotional service are called personalists. Those who engage themselves in meditation on the impersonal Brahman are called impersonalists. Arjuna is here questioning which position is better. There are different ways to realize the absolute truth, but Krishna indicates in this chapter that bhakti yoga, or devotional service to him, is the highest of all. It is the most direct and it is the easiest means for association with the Godhead.
In the second chapter of Bhagavad-gītā, the Supreme Lord explains that a living entity is not the material body. He's a spiritual spark, and the absolute truth is a spiritual whole. In the seventh chapter, he spoke of the living entity as being part and parcel of the Supreme Whole and recommended that he transfer his attention fully to the whole. Then again, in the eighth chapter, it is said that anyone who thinks of Krishna at the time of quitting his body is at once retransferred to the spiritual sky, the abode of Krishna. At the end of the sixth chapter, the Lord clearly said that of all yogis, one who always thinks of Krishna within himself is considered most perfect. So in practically every chapter, the conclusion has been that one should be attached to the personal form of Krishna, for that is the highest spiritual realization.
Nevertheless, there are those who are not attached to the personal form of Krishna. They are so firmly detached that even in the preparation of commentaries to Bhagavad-gītā, they want to distract other people from Krishna and transfer all devotion to the impersonal Brahma-jyotir. They prefer to meditate on the impersonal form of the absolute truth, which is beyond the reach of the senses and is not manifest.
So factually, there are two classes of transcendentalists. Now Arjuna is trying to settle the question of which process is easier and which of the classes is most perfect. In other words, he is clarifying his own position because he is attached to the personal form of Krishna. He's not attached to impersonal Brahman. He wants to know whether his position is secure. The impersonal manifestation, either in this material world or in the spiritual world of the Supreme Lord, is a problem for meditation. Actually, one cannot perfectly conceive of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth. Therefore, Arjuna wants to say, what is the use of such a waste of time? Arjuna experienced in the 11th chapter that to be attached to the personal form of Krishna is best because he could thus understand all other forms at the same time, and there was no disturbance to his love for Krishna. This important question is being asked of Krishna by Arjuna, which will clarify the distinction between the personal and impersonal conceptions of the absolute truth. It's amazing to me that just like Prabhupada here indicates their MO, their modus operandi, they're so detached from a personal form of Krishna that they try to distract people away from Krishna and transfer all their devotion to the impersonal Brahma-jyoti. Now, I wonder why that is. Why do you think that is?
No, I'm not.
It's like, I think it's like partially envy and also because they have this conception of impersonal. Partially, I think it's a suicide. They're afraid of becoming persons themselves, and so they think that the Krishna is some kind of, he can't be a person. All of the cause of all causes and everything, that can't be just in a person. Person's mundane. It's the impersonal is way beyond that. So it's just I think it's probably both. It's like it's also envy, but it's also very offensive. But it's just a misconception. It's a lack of proper intelligence to understand that Krishna is the source of everything. But I mean, eventually Krishna says, if after many millions of births, one who is actually, meditating on the impersonal Brahman and performing welfare service to all living entities, he eventually understands, oh, well, Krishna is everything, and then he surrenders. But why go that route? It's like trying to reach around your head to touch your nose. It's a total waste of time. Okay, you can read the second verse here.
Text 2, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Maya Veshya Mano Yemam, Nicha Yukta Upasate, Shadhaya Parayo Petash, Teme Yukta Tamamata. Synonyms. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Mayi, upon me, Aveshya, fixing, Mana, the mind, yea, those who, Mam, me, Nitya, always, Yukta, engaged, Upasate, worship, Shradhaya, with faith, Haraya, transcendental, Upeta, endowed, Te, they, may, by me, Yuktatama, most perfect in yoga, Mata, are considered. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshiping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect. Report. In answer to Arjuna's question, Krishna clearly says that he who concentrates upon his personal form and who worships him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect in yoga. For one, in such Krishna consciousness, there are no material activities because everything is done for Krishna. A pure devotee is constantly engaged. Sometimes he chants, sometimes he hears or reads books about Krishna, or sometimes he cooks prasadam and goes to the marketplace to purchase something for Krishna, or sometimes he washes the temple or the dishes. Whatever he does not let a single moment pass without devoting his activities to Krishna. Such action is in full samadhi.
Text 3 and 4. Ye tvakshana mandir deshyam avyaktam parapasite sarvatra gamachintyam cha kutastam achalam dhruvam saniyam yendriya gramam sarvatra sambhabudaya te prapnuvanti mam eva sarvabhuta hite rata. Yea, those who to but aksharam, that which is beyond the perception of the senses, anir deshyam, indefinite, avyaktam, unmanifested, parupasate, completely engaged in worshiping, sarvatragam, all-pervading, and chintyam, inconceivable, cha, also, kutashtam, unchanging, achalam, immovable, dhruvam, fixed, sanimyamya, controlling, indriya gramam, all the senses, sarvatra, everywhere, sarvabudaya, equally disposed, te, they, prapnuvanti, achieve, mam, me, eva, certainly, sarvabhuta hite, for the welfare of all living entities, rata, engaged. Translation. But those who worship the unmanifested, which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed, and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses, being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engage in the welfare of all, at last achieve me. Purport. Those who do not directly worship the Supreme Godhead, Krishna, but who attempt to achieve the same goal by the indirect process, also ultimately achieve the same goal. Sri Krishna. After many births, the man of wisdom seeks refuge in me, knowing that Vasudeva is all. End quote. When a person comes to full knowledge after many births, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. If one approaches the Godhead by the method mentioned in this verse, he has to control the senses, render service to everyone, engage in the welfare of all beings. It is inferred that one has to approach Lord Krishna, otherwise there's no perfect realization. Often there is much penance involved before one fully surrenders unto him. In order to perceive the supersoul within the individual soul, one has to cease the sensual activities of seeing, hearing, tasting, working, etc. Then one comes to understand that the Supreme Lord is present everywhere. Realizing this, one envies no living entity. He sees no difference between man and animal because he sees soul only, not the outer covering. But for the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very difficult. So why do you think that is, that it's very difficult?
Well, I mean, a couple things. I mean, as was mentioned in the earlier purport, I mean, it's almost impossible for somebody to fully conceptualize like the impersonal form of the Lord. Like, just trying to come up with this amorphous, supreme something seems like unfathomable to try to create. The other thing I think that why this would be so difficult, here you're being asked to surrender, your senses and your actions and so forth, but you're not necessarily channeling them into a proper, avenue. So like in Krishna consciousness, it's not that you're necessarily just giving up bad habits, you're replacing bad habits with positive behaviors. But in this, it seems like you're just being asked to give up these things.
And perform severe austerity.
Yeah, and even at the end of this, it still seems like, when a person comes to full knowledge, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. So it basically seems like you go through all this stuff attempting to understand the impersonal, and then you still have to surrender to the personal anyway.
Right. You come to the same point.
Yeah.
It's like a long process, which you have to come to the very beginning of. It's like going full circle and then returning to the point where you left off. And then, then it becomes very difficult because you're accustomed to that mode of thinking. And plus, not only that, you have to control your senses. Now, how can you control your senses unless you have a higher taste? And how can you have a higher taste unless you have a relationship with Krishna, with somebody that's higher? that's why Lord Chaitanya, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when Lord Chaitanya, approached him, he was 24 years old, right? When he went to Jagannath Puri, and he could see that he was like, you should, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he couldn't understand Lord Chaitanya. He didn't understand how great he was. He didn't understand he was God. He said, he told him, you're 25, you're a very young man. You should study the Vedas. You should listen to me. You should sit down here and let me teach you the Vedas. And so he sat there for 7 days while Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya talked to him about the Vedanta. And, he sat there and he didn't say anything. He was just very humble. He said, okay, yeah, I'll listen to you. And he said, well, have you understood anything I've said? He said, yeah, I understand all these shlokas, but I don't understand your explanation of it, because it was totally impersonal. It was imaginary commentary on the Vedanta Sutra by the Shariraka Bhāsya of Shankaracharya. And so Lord Chaitanya said that I don't understand your explanation, although I understand all these things. I don't understand your explanation. And so he asked him to explain it his own way. And Lord Chaitanya completely blew his mind. He explained it. He said that the explanation of the Vedas is as clear as the sun, but you are putting this cloud before it, and you can't see the sun, So it's like, the impersonal understanding is just really, really difficult to understand. Eventually you can, as Krishna says here, but it's a long road to hoe, I'll tell you.
Seems like you're earning so many births too, with like the karma you'd accrue from these, actions in the mode of goodness, this welfare work for others. You're still accruing the results of those that you're going to have to burn off.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why that is that you have to understand that the super soul is present everywhere. Just by performing welfare activities for others, you have to understand that everybody's the same. Everybody has a soul, and there's you start seeing the soul only. But then you can't. You have to come to the point where Krishna is seen as the source of all souls. He's this complete whole, and every individual soul is part and parcel of him. It's just a long process, and that's why Lord Chaitanya warns against hearing this Mayavad philosophy, because if you hear it, then you're finished. It's like, your spiritual life is like almost destroyed by hearing this so-called philosophy. You want to read this one? So it's your turn, right?
Yeah.
Text 5.
Text 5. Klesho dikha taras tesam avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukham devad bihir avapyate. Synonyms: klesha, trouble; adhika tara, very much; tesam, of them; avyakta, to the unmanifested; asakta, attached; chetasam, of those whose minds; avyakta, toward the unmanifested; he, certainly; gati, progress; dukham, with trouble; deha vadbi, by the embodied; avapyate, is achieved.
We'll
Translation.
take turns. You read the first paragraph. We'll take turns after that. Am I breaking up at all for you? Because you're breaking up for me.
No, I'm hearing myself in an echo a little bit.
Okay. Let me take it off this. Say something now.
Sure. Hare Krishna. How's that coming? Is it coming through?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I can't hear you now.
Can't hear me? Okay.
I have to put it back. Okay, something now.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Okay, we'll just leave it like this. I don't know what the echo is, but we'll just continue like this. I hope you can.
Okay. Translation. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. Purport. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord are called jnana yogis. And persons who are in full Krishna consciousness, engaged in devotional service to the Lord, are called bhakti yogis. Now, here is the difference between the jnana yogi and the bhakti yogi. It is differently expressed. The process of jnana yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, is very troublesome, whereas the path of bhakti yoga, the process of being in direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is easier and is natural for the embodied soul. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. It is very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Therefore, the bhakti yogi accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind which can thus be applied. Of course, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his form within the temple is not idol worship. There is evidence in the Vedic literature that worship may be saguna or nirguna, of the Supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is saguna worship, for the Lord is represented by material qualities. But the form of the Lord, through represented by material qualities such as stone, wood, or oil paint, is not actually material. That is the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord.
A crude example may be given here. We may find some mailboxes on the street, and if we post our letters in those boxes, they will naturally go to their destination without difficulty. But any old box or an imitation, which we may find somewhere, but which is not authorized by the post office, will not do the work. Similarly, God has an authorized representation in the deity form, which is called Archa Vigraha. This Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. God is omnipotent, all-powerful. Therefore, by his incarnation as Archa Vigraha, he can accept the services of the devotee just to make it convenient for the man in conditioned life.
So for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But for those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads, and they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness, engaged in devotional service simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances unto the deity, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. There is no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. But the personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality directly. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated there that if one ultimately has to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the surrendering process is called bhakti, but instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman, and spends his whole life in that way, the result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up this troublesome path of self-realization because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result.
Yeah, like the non-perceptual feelings. How can you understand non-perceptual feelings? I mean, what is that? I mean, you can't perceive them, so how can you understand them? That's just like that's like completely contradictory to me.
Yeah.
The
One thing that
What?
stands out here with this idea of troublesome too is like, it could be so easy to get diverted or to fall down from that impersonal path. But, in the bhakti path, there's no loss. Like even if you fall down or if you don't complete it in this lifetime, you pick up where you left off. Whereas in the other one, it seems like you could just fall down and then backslide, start over,
Yeah, it's all you got really is the instructions of the Vedanta Sutra, but even that is like a clouded version of it. I don't know why Lord Krishna invented himself as or Lord Shiva incarnated as Shankaracharya. It seems like a really, really I don't know, maybe he's just punishing those people that are envious, that's just to separate them from devotees, but it's such a damaging philosophy. A living entity is eternally an individual soul, and if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he may accomplish the realization of the eternal and knowledgeable aspects of his original nature, but the blissful portion is not realized. So that's what you can meditate on Brahman, but you're not getting a higher taste. So how can you control your senses? That's why it says, even if you attain the Sayujya Mukti with the, like floating in some impersonal Brahman, Brahmajyoti effulgence of Krishna, it is an eternal thing, but you get bored because you don't have any bliss. There's no Ananda there. So you come back down to the spiritual world. I think the verse is Raven Daksha Mukti Manana. You get mukti, but you fall down again because you're just you feel something lacking. There's no bliss, and so you have to go down and perform welfare activities, and so open the hospital or something like that in the material world again, and you engage in material activities again after all this austerity and trouble. You have to fall down again because there is no steady realization, and there's no bliss, there's no relationship there. You're just like merge with the Brahman. That's like hellish. The devotee sees that as hellish because you can't have a relationship with Krishna. That's the worst. By the grace of some devotee, it's such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of Jnana Yoga, may come to the point of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service. At that time, long practice in impersonalism also becomes a source of trouble because he cannot give up the idea. So that's what we were saying before. It's got like, you develop the habit of thinking that way. And so it becomes really, really difficult to break that habit and think of persons again. You're so used to being a suicidal maniac and forgetting about, the personality of Godhead, and we're trying to kill Krishna. And then once you succeed and you think you've become God, then you can't give up the idea of impersonalism anymore. And you have to retrain yourself to think in that way. Actually, Krishna is a God. He is person. Therefore, the embodied soul is always in difficulty with the unmanifest, both at the end of time of practice and at the time of realization. Every living entity is partially independent, and one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of his spiritual, blissful self. One should not take up this process. For every individual living entity, the process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotional service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore this devotional service, there is a danger of turning into atheism. Thus, the process of centering attention to the unmanifested, the inconceivable, that which is beyond the approach of the senses, is already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age. Is not advised by Lord Krishna. But that's the disease that people have in this age. It's very popular. This whole, even science, I think that materialistic science is a form of impersonalism because they want to like negate all the and all this separation of church and state, that's another form of impersonal. How can you separate yourself from Krishna in any state of existence? How can the material world be separate from Krishna? Everything is Krishna. So they're just it's an envious process but that's the way everybody thinks here, because they want to be God themselves and they're envious of the real God. So they try to kill God in any way they can, philosophically, physically, and they're living in this dreamland, which is very difficult to overcome. Fortunately, Prabhupada came here to save us from that mentality. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi. It's a disease of the Western world that Prabhupada, has come to liberate us from. by his association, the guru is a manifestation of God himself. So we can't understand who God is. God is not approachable. God has to reveal himself. And so if we approach the guru, he can show us how to worship Krishna in the temple and to follow his instructions, inquire from him submissively and follow his instructions and serve him. And that way he'll feel obliged and teach you. That's the process of receiving the spiritual truth. And Krishna, he is non-different from Krishna himself. The guru is personality of servitor Godhead because he's very dear. He's not exactly the same, but he's considered to be as dear, as good as a supreme person, and one should never disrespect him in any way, because he is the same as Krishna in that, like the guru is like massaging the legs of Krishna, and Krishna is actually the guru. So he's kind of massaging himself. That's very intimate service. So he's very dear to Mukunda. So we have to offer our respect to Guru as if he were Krishna himself. And that's confirmed in all the scriptures. So, but it's absolutely necessary to approach Krishna like that, because you can't approach Krishna by yourself. I got in this argument with one dude, he said, I can't approach anybody like, a secondary, like a middleman, Oh, like that's not the way it works. You have to approach Krishna through his servitor Godhead. That's Nityananda. No one can approach Krishna by himself. You can't understand Krishna. Krishna has to reveal himself to you. And when he's pleased, he'll reveal himself. But, first you have to find Guru, and then you have to surrender to that Guru. And he is non-different from Krishna. He will give you Krishna.
And in this, the purport there even, goes into that, saying that, the impersonalist, at some point it still relies on the grace of a devotee.
Exactly.
To be able to get that realization, to then look at Krishna as supreme and be able to make that surrender. It still comes from the grace of a devotee who can share that.
Krishna says, one who claims to be my devotee is not my devotee. He says he's the devotee of my devotee. He's my devotee. So it's just the process of disciplic succession. The guru is coming from Krishna himself. Krishna can only reveal himself. You can't see the sun unless the sun is shining. Can any scientist show the sun if it's nighttime? No, they can't. Because it requires the sunshine to see the sun. So similarly, the manifestation of Krishna appears through the guru, and that is the way he appears to human beings. I mean, he sometimes comes himself, but he sends his representative. When he's not here personally, we have to take help from the spiritual master to understand him. Oh, let's see here. How much time do we have? We have 3 minutes.
This is a long one.
Yeah. Well, let's just wrap it up here, and unless you have any more questions.
No, but I think Prabhupada used to use the example, like even if you're trying to see a big person in the material world, you don't get to just go see that person directly. You still require the intermediaries, to get to that person. What to speak then of trying to connect with.
It's like if you want to see a big man, you want to see the president, you want to, first, if you give a lollipop to his kid or something, or pet his dog, then maybe you'll see. That's the idea of seva. You're supposed to approach a guru with some firewood in your hand. He needs firewood for his sacrifice. So you have to approach a guru with firewood, or you have to render him service in some way. And pariprashnena, which means, you have to inquire submissively, humbly, and not be challenging. And paripratana, to surrender. Those 3 things. Tadvidi panipatena pariprashnena sevayas upadekshanti te gyanam ganinas tattvadarsh. He can impart knowledge into you because he has seen the truth. You can't know the truth. We cannot understand the truth by ourselves. If the guru chooses to have mercy on you by your submissive inquiry, then you can understand through him. But we can't understand by ourselves. We might, through Aganta Sakriti, come in contact with a guru, but that, and if you really desire a guru, if you want to understand the truth, 3 kinds of people approach Krishna, but it's rare. And so if you're actually approaching a spiritual master, it says that 1 moment's association with a pure devotee is more valuable than anything. Through lifetimes of study of the Vedas and tapasya and austerities and charity and all these other things are not as valuable as 1 moment. So lava matra means an 11th of a second. That's not very long. Lava matra means a very brief moment of time. That amount of association with a pure devotee is more valuable than lifetimes of going to pilgrimages and performing austerities and so many things. So that's you should get a guru. That's what I'm learning today from these from the Guru Tattva book that I'm reading from Gaura Govindaswamy. He's quite a devotee, and he explains things very nicely. And it's advised in all spiritual master in all the scriptures that it's absolutely essential to find a spiritual teacher and accept initiation from him, because then you are connected with the truth. So we'll have to leave it there, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
All right. Thanks, Shik. Have a good night.
Hare Krishna.
Hey,
Thank you.
Krishna.